When US-made F-16s started arriving in Ukraine in August 2024, the war Russia started took a turn. The F-16s weren't silver bullets, but they gave Ukraine options, especially when it came to defending against Russia's rampant missile and drone attacks. In time, and as more F-16s arrived, Ukraine also began using its Western jets to conduct strikes against Russian positions. Russia knows that Western jets are capable of causing serious damage to its troops in Ukraine. And now another one is set to arrive in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin can't believe what Sweden just gave Ukraine, as Gripen fighter jets are soon going to start terrorizing Russia's troops. On September 29th, the Kyiv Post reported that Ukraine's Deputy Defense Minister, Lieutenant General Ivan Havrilyuk, had confirmed that the arrival of Swedish-made Gripen fighter jets in Ukraine was imminent. Havrilyuk didn't make any sort of grandiose statement about the arrival of these jets. Instead, he subtly revealed that a reporter from the BBC Ukrainian edition was on the right track with the questions that the reporter was asking about Ukraine's incoming fighter jets. Caginess was the order of Havrilyuk's day during that interview. The BBC reporter first asked him the key questions, which were when the new Western fighter jets would arrive in Ukraine and how many it would be getting. Havrilyuk provided a bit of a non-answer to the question, stating, "Come on, when you see them in the air over Ukraine, then you will understand." This was an interesting response that suggests Havrilyuk doesn't want to give too much away when it comes to what Ukraine has prepared for Russia. That makes sense. The more Russia knows, the less effective Ukraine's use of these fighter jets may be, especially if Russia has defenses it can mount against them. However, the BBC reporter kept subtly pushing after Havrilyuk confirmed that the new jets are expected soon. By expected, the reporter asked, did Ukraine's Deputy Defense Minister mean that Ukraine will be getting the F-16, the French-made Mirage, the Gripen, or in a perfect world, all of them? Havrilyuk's response suggests that it's the latter, as all he told the reporter was, "Practically, you named the nomenclature correctly, but I won't go into detail about when, what, which one." It's the part about naming the nomenclature correctly that the Kyiv Post says requires our attention. The outlet says that pretty much equates to Havrilyuk confirming that the reporter had named the correct list of incoming fighter jets in his question, and seeing that the Gripen was part of that list, that could only mean one thing: Sweden's fighter jet is heading to Ukraine. This has been a long time coming, though not for the reasons that you might think. Gripens haven't arrived in Ukraine before, not because Sweden didn't want to provide them, but due to Ukraine saying no when they were first offered. Sweden first suggested supplying some of its Gripens back in 2024. Aerospace Global News reports. After an assessment, Ukraine had to say no because it was in the midst of preparing for the arrival of the F-16. This wasn't a case of Ukraine not wanting the Gripens. Rather, Ukraine knew it already had its hands full with the then new F-16 program and the training its pilots needed to go through to be able to fly their new US-made jets properly. Adding another fighter jet into the mix would have created complications. It was better to complete the F-16 program first and then focus on the Gripens later. Sweden's former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Tobias Billström, confirmed this was the case at the time. Ukraine came to the conclusion that having two fighter systems at the same time, both F-16 and Gripen, is too much, Billström said. He said that the decision made sense in the light of the F-16 offers Ukraine had received. "We must understand that Ukraine was given the opportunity to receive F-16 fighters, of which, of course, there are more in the NATO family. It was logical that Ukraine would want to focus on training its pilots to use a jet that offers a steadier supply of airframes than the Gripen." Sweden responded well. Rather than taking the rejection to heart, it said that it would find other ways to help Ukraine by providing other weapons and military aid. Over a year has passed since this rejection. Ukraine has been flying the F-16 since August 2024, and it's fair to say that it's gotten used to its American airframe by now. By January 2025, a Ukrainian pilot managed to break the world record for the number of cruise missiles shot down during a single F-16 sortie, taking out 6 in one sitting. The F-16 program, at least on the pilot education side, is now complete, which means Ukraine is finally able to change its answer about the Gripen. Now, it's saying yes. That yes came in September, as discussions had opened between Ukraine and its European partners regarding several jets. The Kyiv Post reported on these discussions on September 22nd, noting that the focus seemed to be on the Eurofighter Typhoon jet. However, it also noted that Ukraine's Defense Minister Rustem Umerov had confirmed that there were commitments or consultations for the Gripen ongoing. Though a similarly cagey response to the Gripen question as that provided by his deputy, Umerov's confirmation that commitments were in place was big. Sweden can't make a commitment if Ukraine refuses to take the Gripens it's offering off its hands. The fact that a commitment has been made confirms that Ukraine has said yes and that the Gripen is on its way. And Ukraine will be happy to have this jet in its arsenal. The Gripen had been making headlines just days before Havrilyuk confirmed that the jets are on the list of those that are coming to Ukraine. On September 26th, Euromaidan Press reported that Russia was once again pulling its recent trick of sending its fighter jets to within touching distance of NATO airspace. This time it was the Baltic state of Lithuania that Russia targeted. 5 of Russia's jets approached Lithuania's airspace in what was a move intended to both serve as a threat and a provocation to NATO. The 5-jet formation included a trio of MiG-31s, much like the MiG-31s Russia sent into Estonia's airspace earlier in September. Only this time, the MiGs were accompanied by an Su-30 and an Su-35. The threat was getting bigger. But Russia didn't dare risk sending the jets into Lithuania's airspace. Russia has already been warned by Poland that the next Russian jet that enters NATO airspace is going to be shot down. NATO itself appears to have confirmed this is the case, as you can find out by watching our video covering the new NATO threat. So rather than risk the wrath of NATO, Putin sent his jets to the outskirts of Lithuania. We're telling you all of this because, as you've likely already concluded, NATO had to respond to Russia and its fighter jet games. And it did so by sending in the very airframe that Ukraine now says it's on the verge of receiving from Sweden. The NATO air policing mission operating in Lithuania sent Gripens provided by Hungary to identify Russia's fighter jets and escort them away from Lithuania. That's a vote of confidence in the Swedish jets. If NATO didn't think they were up for the job of dealing with Russia's fighters, it would have sent something else. It didn't. Gripens confronted Russia during its latest aerial incursions, and Gripens succeeded in sending the Russian jets packing. And now this exact jet is the one that's soon going to be arriving in Ukraine. Of course, this leads us to the obvious question of what exactly Ukraine is getting. We don't have all of the answers to this question. Havrilyak provided no more details. We don't know which version of the Gripen Ukraine is set to receive, nor do we know how many of these Swedish jets are en route to the country. We do know that there's already a relationship between the Ukrainian and Swedish air forces, as May saw Ukraine's Ministry of Defense confirm that it was going to receive Saab's help to upgrade some of its Soviet-era jets. Saab is the maker of the Gripen, so there's a chance that these upgrades were accompanied by a fair amount of teaching about what the Gripen is capable of. Who knows? Ukraine's Soviet-era jets may even now have some Gripen components installed in them following Saab's upgrades. Still, even though we don't know the answers to what many would consider the most important questions when it comes to Ukraine's incoming Gripens, what we can tell you is that the jet is among the most capable that Europe has to offer. Army Recognition offers the basic specifications, noting that the Gripen is a single-engine, multi-role fighter that was specifically designed to meet both current and future threats. What Russia just sent close to Lithuania is a current threat. With Gripens in its arsenal, Ukraine should theoretically be capable of dealing with anything that Russia comes up with in the near future. Though the Gripen has many intelligent design features, its advanced aerodynamic layout may be the highlight. The aircraft uses a combined close-coupled canard with both delta configuration and a triplex, along with a digital flight control system that gives the Gripen immense aerial agility. This is a jet designed to come out on top in dogfights as much as it's designed to deliver munitions to threats on the ground. Speaking of munitions, the Gripen is among the most versatile jets around. If you can name a NATO-compatible missile or bomb designed for fighter jets, the odds are high that the Gripen is compatible with it. That's huge for Ukraine, as it means that almost all of the munitions it's receiving from its European and American partners are usable, ensuring it can configure its incoming Gripens to whatever is needed for the operation at hand. Having said all of that, a standard Gripen loadout includes AIM-9, IRIS-T, AIM-120, and Skyflash missiles. It can also be equipped with Mark 82 bombs, BK-90 cluster bombs, GBU-12s, and an anti-ship missile called the RBS-15F. The jet's loadout is completed by a 27mm Mauser high-energy gun that uses automated radar guidance to ensure a pilot can lock onto a target easily. This is not a jet with which Russia's pilots want to tangle. Beyond that, the Gripen can hit a top speed of 2,200 km per hour. That's equivalent to 1,367 miles per hour, or about Mach 1.8. So not only is the Gripen agile, but it's very fast. The jet's range is 3,000 kilometers or 1,864 miles, and there are versions made that can be crewed by 1 or 2 people. Again, we don't know which of these versions Ukraine will be getting, so we won't speculate in that department. Saab, the manufacturer of the jet, also provides some interesting tidbits of information in their online product brochure for the Gripen E, which is one of the more modern versions of the jet. It dubs the Gripen E the game changer, noting that it has been designed to overcome any potential adversary. Saab says that newer versions of the Gripen have artificial intelligence or AI capabilities that have transformed the jet's cockpit. AI facilitates the creation of what Saab calls a wide-area display that allows the pilot to see information that can aid in their decision-making. Through this display, the pilot can also select, launch, and even guide the weapons they fire as they coordinate with other members of their unit. The Gripen is also built to counter one of Russia's most potent weapons, electronic warfare, or EW. Gripen does real-time signal analysis and countermeasures management, as well as extensive electronic intelligence, ELINT, signal collection to vanquish any rival, Saab proclaims. In practice, this means that the Gripen can overcome most Russian attempts to interfere with its systems. It also has EW tools it can use for offense, which Saab says allow the Gripen to disrupt an enemy's capacity to perform. Refueling and rearming are also quick. The Gripen's design allows for both to be completed in less than 20 minutes. In a war where Russia is increasingly relying on missile and drone strikes, having an airframe that can head out, defend, reload, and then head out again is extremely valuable to Ukraine. But beyond all of this, the Gripen may end up being iconic for Ukraine for another reason. It's an example of what can be achieved when a country takes control of its own manufacturing. When Sweden conceptualized the Gripen, several other aerial platforms were available to be bought. The F-16 and French-made Mirage were among them. However, Sweden didn't want to be beholden to any other country when it came to operating its own aircraft, so it decided to go it alone with the Gripen. After achieving backing via state funding in the 1980s, Saab built the aircraft and then refined what they had, creating a jet that can stand toe-to-toe with any fourth or fourth-plus generation fighter out there. Ukraine has experienced a similar journey in which it has increasingly gone its own way with weapons development, especially after a 2025 that has seen support from the US being inconsistent at best. The Gripen is a symbol of what a country can achieve when it goes its own way. Now it could be a major asset for Ukraine as it attempts to secure its sovereignty. And that brings us nicely to what Ukraine will actually be able to do with the Gripen once it arrives. We already know what the jet is capable of from a technical perspective, but how will Ukraine actually use it in the fight against Russia? The wealth of information a Gripen provides to its pilot offers us the first answer to that question. Military analyst Wes O'Donnell highlights just how intelligent the latest versions of the Gripen are, suggesting that the jets may even be strong enough to be F-35 killers in a March 2025 article. Where the Gripen stands apart from most other jets is in the sheer amount of information it offers up. It's not about having the fastest jet or the one with the most missiles anymore, though the Gripen is no slouch in those departments. As O'Donnell puts it, the side that sees the battlefield first, shares data the fastest, and makes decisions in real time has the advantage. In a world where milliseconds can mean the difference between victory and getting blown out of the sky, seamless data sharing is king. And that's where the Gripen comes in. The combination of detection capabilities, its integrated AI, and the information sharing we touched on earlier all mean that the Gripen is among the best fighter jets Ukraine stands to receive. When running defense, a Gripen is fast and agile enough to avoid drones and other projectiles en route to taking out missiles that represent major threats. It can also share what it sees with Ukraine's other defenses, making them more effective. Offensively, the Gripen is agile enough to avoid many types of air defense missiles, with its multi-role nature making it just as useful for striking ground targets as it is in confronting aerial ones. And if Ukraine ever decides to engage in dogfighting with Russia's jets, the Gripen will be a great choice for that particular task. Beyond this versatility, the Gripen offers something else that Ukraine really needs right now. It's cheap to use. More specifically, it costs about $4,000 per hour of flight, United 24 reports. That's around half the amount that it costs to keep an F-16 in the air for an hour, and every little helps when it comes to Ukraine's finances right now. The Atlantic Council says that Ukraine and Russia are locked in a war of economic attrition, as much as they are locked in an attritional battle on the ground. Including Western support, Ukraine's military expenditure amounts to about $100 billion a year, which is no less than 50% of Ukraine's GDP, with 30% coming from the Ukrainian budget in 2024, the Atlantic Council points out. Russia spent $170 billion during the same year, though the sum only equates to 8% of Russia's GDP. Responsible statecraft takes a doom and gloom view of Ukraine's economic situation, suggesting that the country is spending more than it can afford on its defense. Ukraine has been running an annual budget deficit of 22% above its GDP since Putin launched his invasion. In 2025 alone, Ukraine will have a budget shortfall of about $41.5 billion, as it's forced to pump more cash into its defense. Tax increases and military aid haven't been able to solve these problems. The war could end tomorrow, the outlet claims, and Ukraine might still run out of money by the end of 2026. Financially, Ukraine is in no small amount of peril. We're not suggesting that the Gripen is going to solve these problems. Saving about $4,000 per hour of flight time compared to an F-16 isn't a massive saving, but it's something. If Ukraine is able to save money on a few hundred hours of flight time during the war, that $4,000 saved per hour could turn into a fairly respectable sum. Not enough to save Ukraine's economy by a long shot, but every little helps when it comes to these sorts of financial issues. Coming back to practicalities, the Gripen is also a useful addition to Ukraine's fighter jet stockpiles because it's capable of taking off and landing on unconventional surfaces such as civilian highways. NATO even reported its pilots practicing these kind of maneuvers in 2024, and Ukraine will want to learn as much as it can about this capability. Having a jet that is versatile enough to not need to rely on an airbase for takeoff or landing could prove important when protecting the Gripen against Russia's airstrikes. Finally, the Gripen gives Ukraine more options. Again, it's all about versatility, as we highlighted when discussing the many potential loadouts Ukraine can utilize for this Swedish jet. The Gripen provides Ukraine with options, and now that the jet has finally been combat tested after Thailand used it earlier in 2025 against Cambodia during a border clash, Ukraine can at least feel confident that they're getting a jet that could prove effective against Russia. The Gripen isn't a game changer, but its arrival may be enough to give Ukraine the ability to create better air defenses and cause more damage to Putin's troops in occupied Ukraine. Perhaps Ukraine might even consider using the Gripen in its defense of Pokrovsk. If Ukraine makes that choice, the Swedish jet will only add to the woes of Russia's beleaguered troops near the city. Russian soldiers are dropping like flies in Pokrovsk as they die in droves for almost non-existent territorial gains. Find out more in our video, and remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more updates on the latest aircraft entering Ukraine's arsenal. And thank you for watching.